My sort of favorite story to share on this lane is, of course, at the beginning of COVID, my company was taking a nosedive, like 30% loss in a month type thing. And I had the CFO telling me I have to lay people off, which I'd never done before. I had, we had no money coming in or a third less money coming in. And so we really had to figure out a lot of stuff in that moment, as did most business leaders that were going through it. But what I learned as a leader for myself in that moment, I was just so upset and I was crying and, concerned and all the things. And out of the blue, a friend of mine who I barely knew at that time texted me and said, "How quickly can you add 50 people to your team?" And I was like, "What?" Like, it just came out of nowhere. It wound up turning into nothing. PPP came through the next day. We could have slogged through the rest of it, and we wound up not even taking a loss for the year. So it was great. But what I learned in the moment was I needed hope in that moment, is what I needed as a leader to get me through it, to get my head clear enough to think through what we're going to do with my leadership team.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast, where we talk with dynamic leaders from all over the world who have said yes to the call to leadership and are here to share their stories about why they decided to pursue leadership, what that means on a broader scale, and especially what it means for you. Today's guest is Emily Morgan, and she is going to go into a topic that I think all leaders need to really pay attention to. The topic I'm talking about is delegation. So, Emily, are you ready for kickoff?
Yes, great to be here.
Yeah, it is. So right out of the gate, Emily, would you be so kind as to paint the picture for us? When did you get your call to leadership? What was happening in your life? Do you remember a specific moment, or was it more general? And how did answering the call lead you to the work you do today?
Yeah, great question. So my story of being an entrepreneur is probably different than many of the entrepreneurs that you meet with. I was raised by teachers, and I had no idea anything about business. I wasn't taught about business. I didn't go to college for business. I wasn't in the business clubs in high school, none of that. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And because my parents were, and that was sort of the world that I had grown up in. And then, I basically decided that I really enjoyed administrative work, and that's what I was doing for my career to date. But I wanted to go ahead and do something on my own because I was having my son, and I knew I didn't want to deal with a commute in and out of Philadelphia every day with a baby. So I also knew that I really liked helping people and I liked what I was doing. So at that point, it was about 15 years ago, and I learned about what is now the virtual assistant industry. So at that point, it was newly forming. And so I decided, I could take these skills and apply them to do the same work, but do it on my own terms at home. So when I started my company, it was all about me and my ability to have a more flexible work-life balance and be able to be present for my son, but still do work that I love.
Yes. And your company is called Delegate Solutions, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And team, here's a couple of facts about Emily. First of all, she, you can tell she likes what she does. And I love that you were not, you're not a traditional entrepreneur in the sense that we read about them today. Mm-hmm. And yet you've been featured in Forbes as a top 50 remote employer. You've built a company that's really helping a lot of people, particularly entrepreneurs who are notorious for saying, I can do everything. I can do it all. And that is absolutely not true, especially as a company begins to grow and scale. You need help. And you have a book coming out at the end of May of this year. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But, and you're also a mother. I mean, to me, when you become a parent, that's one of the first things you learn to do is ask for help. So could you talk about why is it so hard for entrepreneurs and busy executives and any kind of leader really to delegate? What is at the root of this problem?
Such a loaded question because there's a traditional answer to that question. And then there's the answer that I've uncovered of all my years learning about delegation, specifically for entrepreneurial founders, leadership teams, things like that. So when we start our companies, we are doing something we're really passionate about. We're very excited by it, motivated by it. We put everything we have into it and it starts to grow. And we start to assume this persona of like, I solve all the problems. I'm so busy. I'm so important because everyone comes to me to solve all the problems. And what happens is you eventually run out of time. And so if we kind of stay in that lane of being a firefighter, being a hero, sort of being the person who's dealing with everything, we find ourselves not having any time to get back in touch with why we started the company or bring any vision to what we're doing. So it's sort of born out of just our own pursuit of excellence. And then we just kind of hit a ceiling of being overwhelmed.
Interesting. That makes complete sense to my journey as an entrepreneur slash freelancer slash solopreneur, whatever you want to call yourself. And I know that Team PYP is made up of a number of different kinds of folks who either are following their own path the way you and I are, or they're working within an organization, but may have some independence to, maybe they're leading a team or a division and may have a side hustle, but yes, time is the currency that you really are helping people grow, get back some of your time and energy. Yes. Talk to us about, you have an interesting approach to talking about, it isn't just about time. It is about energy as well.
Yeah. I like to say that delegation is an energy management system. So it's a way for us to sort of manage how we're spending our energy. And as leaders, the number one thing we have to protect is our energy because that's what's keeping the company going. It's what's keeping the excitement and the innovation moving forward. And so if we find ourselves spending half our time doing work that drains us, that doesn't excite us, like we're just going to find ourselves in a rut. And so the sooner we can get those things off our plate, the more we can redirect our energy towards the more impactful work.
Absolutely. When you work with clients, have you noticed, is there a category of tasks or things that you teach to delegate that most fall into, or is there like a pie chart of different kinds of things? I mean, talk to us about some of those percentages that you've noticed over the years you've been doing this kind of work. What's the number one thing that leaders resist delegating?
Oh, wow. Well, that's different for everybody. But one word of caution that I fully think is at the root cause of our challenges with delegation is being really clear on what you want to spend your time on. Because as you're growing, you're doing all the things, you're doing some things you're really good at, but it's still not the unique ability work, the work, God-given talent, the things that you are put on this earth to do. And so I like to encourage, the leaders that we work with to say, all right, spend some time getting really clear on what you want to spend your time on instead. And when you're clear on that, then we start to figure out what are all the other things you're doing that are not that, and start to make a plan to take those off your plate.
That is a great visual. I'm imagining a whiteboard or a big piece of paper where a leader could write down, this is what I love to do. This is what I'm really good at. And this is what moves the needle for me.
Yep.
And then everything else can just go somewhere else. So tell us more about your company and how you serve entrepreneurs. When someone comes to work with you, Emily, I hate to use the word typical because there is no typical, but in general, do you have a playbook that you draw from that, someone listening who might be thinking, man, I am terrible at delegation. How might she help me?
Yeah. So we work with overwhelmed leaders or leaders that recognize like, hey, I have to get these really big, important things done. And I just either don't have the energy for the small stuff or don't have the time to finish all these other things. It's holding me back. It's impacting my relationships at home. It's impacting my client relationships. We're not delivering on our promises because we don't have follow through. So there's a million pain points that bring people to my company. And we are there to help you unpack what those are, because a lot of entrepreneurs in particular can get really stuck there because they are like, I don't even know where to start. I'm just so overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. So we have a lot of exercises that we'll do with our clients to help sort of unpack that process. We built an entire delegation system that helps us sort of systematically think through how to clear things off our plate so it's not so overwhelming. So we work with overwhelmed leaders or leaders that are trying to up-level their time.
I'm just laughing because who today isn't overwhelmed?
Exactly.
It's all of us have our, we have our blind spots. We have our places where we're stubborn, and either it's out of, I think overwhelm really is, it's like, we know we need to get some help. We know we shouldn't be doing all these things. And yet when it comes time to sit down and really think through, we're so tired. We don't even have the energy. Going back to what you're saying about energy management, I think that's such a brilliant approach to thinking about. It's not the task list. It's not the to-do list. It's start with how much energy do you have, and where do you want to?
Where do you want to?
Right.
Sort of the inverse, because a lot of the times if we just start like delegating, we're like throwing things at people. Oh my God, get this off my plate. But if we don't have a clear vision for what we're going to spend our time on instead and have a plan that we're going to enact around it, we just start refilling that time with more and more crap, because it's a vacuum. There's endless crap coming our way, especially as business owners, especially in this day and age, as you're sharing.
It's so true. And we were talking in the pre-chat about the mindset around letting go and being willing to trust somebody else or someone's else, as the case may be, to tasks that perhaps in the early days we were doing because we didn't have anybody else. It was our baby. And the hardest, I think outside of delegating, the hardest transition entrepreneurs face is when they realize that they have to become the CEO of their company and let go of the thing that they founded their company on. And so they're no longer the journeyman or journeywoman. Yep. Now they're actually a business leader, and it takes a completely different mindset and a completely different set of skills to do that. And it's not that entrepreneurs aren't capable. It's just, I know in my experience, and also, again, people like yourself and people I've talked to on this show, is there's that time in between. And that's when you need help the most, because you are in a growth phase on a personal level, and you need help to continue meeting client needs, or maybe it's with marketing, or it's with sales or admin, all of it. Yeah. Really, really interesting.
I've had so much growth on that level personally myself in the last couple of years. I know I subscribe to a leadership model of, get out of the way,
yes.
I don't need to be the doer of all the things, or even like, all I'm here to do is bring the vision, be a thought leader in my space, and put great people in place to, do what they do best. So I'm a very hands-off, working on the business, not in the business leader, but that's come of many years of developing my own mindset and capabilities and putting the right people in place for that to happen.
It's a great segue into my next question, which has to do with when things didn't go according to your plan, when you found yourself playing out of position, Emily. I would love for you to talk in more depth about what happened, what you noticed about yourself during that transition to where you are today, when, again, you probably felt like you were fumbling around a lot. You know, things might have fallen through the cracks. You may have suffered from just complete exhaustion. I mean, I don't know what your story is, but I think that space of transitioning from being the one that's doing most of the things to being, I'm a hands-off leader and I'm going to put the right people in the right places and be the thought leader and work on the business.
Right. So I'll give just a tiny bit of context because, you know, I'm very deep into this at this point. So I don't know how long your listeners have been running companies. I've been running my company for 15 years. I have a leadership team and I have about 50 employees that are all remote around the US. So it's taken me a really long time to get to that point. So just to be clear, what I share is, you know, what do they say? It takes years to be an overnight success. It took years to get to this place that I'm currently at. And it was never my vision when I started the company that this is what it was going to look like. So I preface anything I'll share with that so that no one feels like, wow, that was so easy.
Right. Good. Thank you.
So, you know, my sort of favorite story to share on this lane is, of course, at the beginning of COVID, my company was taking a nosedive, like 30% loss in a month type thing. And I had the CFO telling me I have to lay people off, which I'd never done before. I had, you know, we had no money coming in or a third less money coming in. And so we really had to figure out a lot of stuff in that moment, as did most business leaders that were going through it. But what I learned as a leader for myself in that moment, I was just so upset and I was crying and, you know, like concerned and all the things. And out of the blue, a friend of mine who I barely knew at that time texted me and said, how quickly can you add 50 people to your team? And I was like, what? Like it just came out of nowhere. And it wound up turning into nothing. Like it, you know, PPP came through the next day, you know, we could have slogged through the rest of it. And we wound up not even taking a loss for the year. So it was great. But what I learned in the moment was I needed hope in that moment is what I needed as a leader to get me through it, to get my head clear enough to think through what we're going to do with my leadership team.
Never underestimate the power of hope, ever. Oh, yeah. Wow.
And lots of great, you know, we were then so much, and I don't know if this is a female entrepreneur thing or what, just me in general, but like my company only grows as fast as I grow as a leader, right? And so the more I get in the way, the more I can't grow and let go and all the things that I need to do, the slower we grow. So it's like so fascinating. Like the faster you can get out of the way and have the right people in place and the right process, you know, the sky is the limit. We are the ones that limit our growth in my experience.
It's so true.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
I was talking to a woman earlier this morning, recording an episode, and she was talking about burnout and where burnout comes from, and it's what you just described. We limit ourselves. We think we can do more than we can. We don't know how to ask for help. When help shows up, like in the case of me talking to you, you have a company that helps people. There's still resistance. People say, I couldn't possibly do that. I don't even know where to begin, and blah blah and all this stuff. And yet, the faster you can, basically grab the bull by the horns and look it in the eyes and say, "You're not going to mow me down. just throw it off to the side.
Right.
It's so true. So
And
true.
I mean, I don't know that it's female specific, but I definitely in the leaders that I talk to, which is like pretty much everybody I speak to is a business leader. Like it seems like women really have a harder time with this part of it because like for us, typically the business is like such a passion and it's from such an organic place. Like we typically aren't starting businesses because like, oh, we see this opportunity in the market. I'm going to go figure out how to do this. It's usually something we really are passionate about.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if it's, necessarily about being female or male. I want to say it might have more to do with just how someone is built.
Sure.
Because I know people, and I know lots of men who have the same issue of letting go of the control of, they may go about it differently than women because of cultural conditioning and socialization and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the root issue is there's ego involved. There's fear about, can anybody actually do this as well as I can? And the fact of the matter is absolutely, in fact, you want people who can do it better than you can, so you can do what you do well.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to, you brought up the fact that at the beginning of COVID, you would think that a company like yours would have just been going gangbusters because suddenly everything was remote. And yet you went through what I think almost every company did, where you saw a pretty sudden loss and, had to reconfigure and think through, now what are we going to do? But the world now is different.
Yep.
As we come out of the pandemic, things have opened up again. People are traveling, but the way we work has fundamentally changed. All these people who never in a million years believed they would work remotely now want to work remotely. So talk about the power of having a remote workforce, because you do. That is your business model. And for people listening who either may be in a hybrid situation or they haven't fully embraced that this can work, what would your words of wisdom be about embracing, for the kinds of jobs that allow you to be remote? Obviously, not everything can be.
Yeah. So to preface, we were doing remote before remote was cool. So I was like,
yes, you were
15 years ago on a podium pounding my fist about, why people won't work from home. I don't understand. I went from this place of like educating constantly for over a decade to like, suddenly everybody's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Because we had to.
Mm-hmm. We had to.
So different. But in terms of, what was your question again in terms of remote work?
Just what now that we see so much of companies embracing the remote model, and yet there's still some resistance to it, either from companies saying, well, now you need to come back in, and people are like, no, I want to stay remote, or people who want to get out of their house and have a place to go, and the company is saying, no, we've cut way down on our space. I mean, I guess my question has to do with, what words of wisdom can you offer my audience about having a fully remote workforce? What works for you, Emily, in terms of managing people all over the United States and not seeing them in person, but seeing them on a Zoom screen?
Yeah, I mean, that's the DNA. I always like to say, like, Zoom is my natural habitat. Like, when I think back on the pandemic, I'm like, man, I should have invested in Zoom. Like, if I had my head on straight in that moment, I knew, because I run a remote company, why didn't I invest in Zoom? So that's one of my biggest regrets.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Funny. But I think, my words of wisdom is like, evolve or die. Like, people are not subscribing to that way of working anymore. And so you've got to figure it out. And COVID forced everyone to figure it out, whether it's a full-time remote or it's a hybrid or whatever. I think ignoring it is a big mistake. So that's number one. How do we manage a remote team? So it's an interesting question, because I don't have the context of somebody that was managing on site and how to make the change. I recognize that is a huge deal and a huge difference. Like, we've been set up and perfecting this from day one to work well. Mm-hmm. So some of the tools that we use, if that's helpful, we use Slack, and we use Slack not just as like work stuff. We have very intentionally designed our culture around Slack. So we have all kinds of channels that we use that have nothing to do with work. It's about celebrating each other or having this shared interest. So we use Slack to build community on the team. We also use Bamboo HR as a HR management tool. So that's how we handle all of our performance reviews and conversations. And those are all done on Zoom. We always require everyone to have their camera on. Prior to coming off onto this podcast, I came off of our weekly team huddle, which is 15 minutes, entire company's there. We rotate who is hosting. Everyone's on video. We follow the same agenda every week. Half the time is positive focus, where we have a group that shares something awesome going on. We give a couple updates, and then we do a shared learning where we rotate through and someone shares what they've learned on some account that they're working on. And then we close with a core values story. So we do that every single week. In addition to that, we have weekly team meetings. So the team works in small teams that are managed by a manager, and they have weekly pack meetings. They have performance conversations. So it's a lot of hands-on, but it's all on Zoom.
Well, thank you for taking us inside your systems and processes for that. It's very specific, and obviously it works. I like that you have that consistency week in and week out. That's a mark of great leadership, is you created your playbook and said, this is how we do things around here. And the fact that you end with a core value story is telling in and of itself.
They love my team. They live and die for the core values. We recite them at the beginning of every meeting. Every single weekly meeting that the team has, we recite the core values. We talk about them. We give examples of them. We also use Asana to stay organized and in our work with clients. Let me see what else. Yeah, we run on EOS, which is the Entrepreneur's Operating System, and that allows us to give everybody metrics and numbers. And so it's really simple. The numbers that the team is working with is all about utilization. And we use grow.com as a way to feed in all the data so that everybody's looking at their key number and are they on track or off track, and they're being managed and held accountable based on that. So it's
fantastic.
All by design.
Yes, all by design, which is, again, nothing of significance comes randomly. I mean, yeah, every so often there might be some crazy stroke of luck or, right place, right time story that, makes the nightly news or goes viral. But the fact of the matter is, you've been at this for 15 years. You've had a lot of time for trial and error. Things have worked, things haven't.
Yep.
And I think it's interesting too that you use EOS. I just had another conversation last week with a woman whose company uses the EOS system as well. And it sounds like a really awesome way to, again, bake in accountability and rewards and look at your metrics and know all in one place. So team, if you're taking notes here, I would encourage you to go back and listen, write these down. I'll make a list of some of these tools that Emily's mentioning, because these are the tools of not only today, but of the future. Having Slack channels. And I use Trello in my business. I think was bought by Asana. So Asana is the parent company, but they kept Trello the same. But it's one of those places that you go in and really visualize, again, step 1, step 2, step 3 for systems and processes, and also keep track of who's on deck, for me with my podcast, and communicate with key members who have access to different boards. It's, all these systems weren't around 15 years ago when you got started. I think 15 years ago was 2007. I think what a world. We were right. We were just entering the recession, right? Which seems like light years away now. The internet wasn't anything like it is today. Everything was clunky. I mean, it really is remarkable. And I think sometimes, speaking of celebration, we all need to step back and give ourselves a pat on the back for adjusting and evolving, to your point, evolve or die. You have to learn to embrace the tools that are created. And at first it may seem like, well, why would I need that? And then you say, how could I live without that? You know? Oh my gosh.
You just gotta pick something. Like, that's something we've learned over the years, and we coach clients on. Like, there's not a tool that is a silver bullet that's going to do every single thing you want. So just find the one that's closest to what you want and commit to it, and just make it, even if it's 80%, like, it's good enough until something that, you know, is more interesting comes along. But we find a lot of times people are jumping tech, and it can be really disruptive to, especially a virtual team. Like, I cannot imagine getting out of Asana at this point.
Right.
It would just be so disruptive. So we introduced Bamboo. Now we have an HR management tool. We have Harvest for time tracking. We have grow.com, which is now these dashboards. So, you know, we use lots of different tools, but I think jumping from, you know, this one doesn't do this and this one doesn't do that, and dragging a team through that, it's total burnout.
Oh, total burnout. And it's in some ways, it's similar to the entrepreneur who builds a website and then says, I don't like this, and goes to a completely different platform, and then has to learn all that, and then decides, no, I'm going to do it this way. I mean, again, raising my hand here, I went through so many iterations of a website. And at the end of the day, to be honest, most people don't care. They just want to be able to go and see that you're a real person, that your message is aligned with your values and the services or the products, or services and products that you offer. But it's so easy. It's so easy to get this shiny object syndrome, which seems like an old phrase now, but it's still so relevant. I see them advertise sometimes on, especially during football games, because they know their audience. They'll advertise this brand new platform, and I think, who has time for that? I have my platforms. It's like social media. Also, some people say, "Oh, I'm on all the platforms." I'm like, "Wow, is that all you do with your life?" Because jumping from LinkedIn to Twitter to Facebook to Instagram to YouTube to wherever you're going, they're all so very different in terms of how you show up to communicate and what kinds of content you put out. And do you have a favorite social? I'm just curious.
You know, I'm pretty old school, so I'm on Facebook and personally, and I use LinkedIn lightly, but like, we have people that handle all of our social media.
Yes, good.
Not something I'm good at or really, really enjoy. So I don't get out of the way.
Definitely. Well, we're at the part of the show I call Touchdown, Emily. So you are in the red zone. And as a football fan, you know that it can get crazy when there are less than 30 seconds left on the clock and your team is down by 4 points. It's third down, so it is now or never. Tell us a story about a time when you helped to get the ball into the end zone for that game-winning touchdown.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball with my answers, sticking with the sports analogy a little bit. So back to COVID, I have a team of mostly moms working for me. So you can imagine we were impacted differently than most companies because moms were so impacted by COVID, right? Now we have our kids home. And for us, people that have worked at home for a long time, we never had to do it with the children home. Like, it just doesn't work. And so when COVID happened, one of the things that we did to sort of set our team up for success so that they weren't quitting, like, there was just this intense pressure on my team to, like, I don't think I can do it all, right? So we rolled out this thing called Kids Camp. It was virtual, and we put it on all day, every day for our team. And all of our kids would come on to virtual Kids Camp, and it had a schedule. And we had clients donating their time. Clients' kids were coming. My mother was teaching a hula class. A client was teaching Chinese. We were making cards for first responders. Like, we pulled out all the stops because we just had to work. And this was like the only way that we could do it, is if we pulled together and did it. So it was pretty fun.
That is amazing. What an incredible story. So is kids camp still something that's going on, or because most kids are back at school, you kind of push it aside?
Oh yeah, it's long gone, but it lives forever in our hearts.
Oh, I love it. That is,
Virtual
Again,
kids camp.
leave it up to a bunch of moms. I tell you, the power.
We loved it. It was so fun. And so we got to meet each other's kids, and we would get pockets of like an hour to get something done.
You know what? A friend of mine said her mother told her, you can get a lot more done in an hour than you think. And I'll tell you, you can. You really can. If you put your mind to it. I mean, what is it? Is it Pareto's principle that time expands to the task at hand, or it shrinks depending? It's like,
so true.
It's so true. Oh, wow. What a great story. Thank you for sharing that. And inspiring listeners who, who knows, we might find ourselves in another, we just don't know. I'm not even going to put that out there.
We definitely know. We don't know. We definitely know that.
We definitely know that. Well, listen, you've got your book coming out in May. Tell us a little bit more about your book, and where will people be able to get it? And where do you hang out online, Emily?
Yeah. So book releases late May, just in time for my birthday, which is the end of May.
All right.
Very exciting. Where can people get it? It's going to be everywhere. So Amazon. We'll have a sales page, I think, on our website where you can buy it. But the book is called Let It Go. And the subtitle is How to Finally Master Delegation and Scale Freedom Across Your Organization.
Woo, fabulous title.
Yeah, thank you. It's deep work that we do in the book. It's not like a normal delegation conversation. It's a lot of introspection. And where do people find me? DelegateSolutions.com is our website. It's the best way to reach me.
Excellent. And you do have a special link for PYP, and it's just delegatesolutions.com/PYP, right?
That's right.
Okay. And team, you know that you can go right there, type it in, or there'll be links on Emily's show notes page at pyppodcast.com, where you can get her book, you can get her free resource, you can see a list of some of the amazing systems and tools that her company uses to be as successful as they are in serving clients all over the place. And before we wrap up what has been a really great conversation today, I learned a lot and you got me thinking about my own space as someone who operates this podcast and does freelance work. Tell us who your team is, Emily. What are you watching on Saturday and or Sunday?
So huge Philly Eagles fan. I bleed midnight green, as does my son. It's like the number one thing I've imparted in him. So huge fans.
Wonderful. Well, as of this recording, we are just coming up on the NFL draft. So a lot of new blood going to be entering into the NFL for the fall season, which certainly all football fans look forward to. But in the meantime, here on the East Coast, we're going to enjoy the spring and the summer and your birthday and the launch of your book, which sounds incredible. And team, if you have people in your life who struggle with delegation, or you yourself, you're going to want to get this book, and you're going to want to get into Emily's world, because if you were listening today, and I know you were, she just gave us the insight into why it's hard, why it matters, why we can benefit from letting it go. And again, congratulations on your book and on the success of your company.
Thank you.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.